The poet Ruth Sawyer writes, "Shall I tell you what will come to Bethlehem on Christmas morn, and who will kneel them gently down before the Lord newborn? One small fish from the river with scales of red, red gold, one wild bee from the heather, one gray lamb from the fold, one ox from the high pasture, one black bull from the herd, one goatling from the fat hills, one white, white bird. And many children, God give them grace, bringing tall candles to light Mary's face." Well, we're going to talk about Mary today. You heard Betsy speak about Mary and a little bit about her life, about how old she was and what was her condition. If you read Matthew and Luke that we have in the Bible, it says that Mary was an engaged person when the angel Gabriel came. And in Hebrew culture, that means she would have been about 13, maybe 14, but 12, 13, 14, something like that. In those days, when Hebrew boys got bar mitzvah, they were considered men, so they were eligible to marry. And so Hebrew men would get engaged when they were 12 or 13 and get married when they were 14 or 15, and so the women were about that age as well. So we're talking about teenagers here. We're talking about the kids that were sitting up here playing our instruments, and our kids over there being 13 and 14 years old, getting visited by an angel and say, "Guess what? You're going to have a baby." Wouldn't that be exciting? So Mary gets visited by an angel, Gabriel. Gabriel, by that time, was considered an archangel, one of the 4 most important angels of God at the time. I'm rather ambivalent about angels, by the way, whether they exist or not. Some people do believe they exist, some people don't. But it talks about angels today. Mary meets an angel. But I know when I read further in the gospel and I read about the real life Mary, I discover a woman who I think we can use an example of faith because, first of all, we read Mary with her other children. She had other children besides Jesus, coming to see the adult Jesus in his ministry to make sure he was okay because they were hearing stories about him, so she wanted to make sure. So she was wondering. And we read a little further and we see in the Gospel of John that Mary was at the foot of the cross when Jesus was crucified. And in the book of Acts, we see Mary with the other followers of Jesus praying after the death and resurrection. And we see a person of faith who wondered and pondered and struggled and doubted and came to believe that Jesus was the one. I always wonder what Mary thought about this child she had, this one that came into the world. In the Bible, Mary doesn't really say that much. About the only time she really talks is in Luke chapter 1, which we heard part of it today. The other thing she does, she sings a song, which is probably more of an ancient song of Miriam from the Old Testament or words of Luke himself. But her song goes like this: "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servants. Surely from now on all generations will come to call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arms, and he has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever." And it's a song of God being with the poor and the oppressed and the forgotten. So I need to tell you that one time I had a religious experience over this song. I was about 34, 35, been a minister for about 8 or 9 years and serving my second congregation, and it was Christmas Eve, and somebody else was supposed to read Mary's song during the worship service, but for some reason that person wasn't there. I can't remember why now. So then I stepped up to read it. But unbeknownst to me, the organist planned to play the organ underneath that song. And all of a sudden, my words and her song just synced together. And I had this overwhelming feeling that God was right there. You see, my friends, I'm ambivalent about angels because I never met one. But I'm not ambivalent about God because I've met God a few times. And that's what this season's all about. God with us. God in the here and now to help us. As Barbara reminded us today is the shortest day of sunlight of the year. 9 hours, 15 minutes, and 19 seconds. Don't forget about those 19 seconds. And tomorrow, we get one more second. One more. And after that, we get 3 more seconds. And the day after that, 3 more seconds. And the day after that, 3 more seconds. So what I'd like you to do is to imagine that 1 second tomorrow is God. God's light for you. God's love for you. God's grace for you. God's peace for you. God's hope for you. And I think what you'll discover, that makes all the difference. See, we've been spending the whole month talking about the stories within the story. And most of the stories, what we've been telling, have been about ordinary people who felt inspired by God to do extraordinary things. And that's what God does, is helps us do extraordinary things. Right now, our hearts is hurting because of all the violence in the world, between the races, between police and protesters, and all those things. And we need to let the light of God and the love of God shine through to help us solve our problems and to help us find our peace. That 1 second makes all the difference. So, are you ready for the birth of the Christ child? Are you ready for the peace that comes from God? The love that comes from God, the hope that comes from God, the joy that comes from God, all in that 1 second. When we take that same affirmation of Mary that says, "Here am I, Lord. Let me be your servant."